Pension liberation scams are less of an issue here on Ireland at the moment than they are in the UK. In the UK, we've seen 49,000 retirees scammed in the last 12 months. 35% of over 55s have been subject to a pensions liberation scamming attempt. And part of that is because of the advent of pension freedoms, but of course it doesn't have to be pension freedoms that allow pension scamming. Any asset that you hold that a scammer can access, then they will look to access it. And with pension scamming, it's usually around assets. It's usually around being able to invest in something that will get a better performance. So let's take your pension money and let's invest it in rubber tree plantations somewhere exotic or whatever it might be. Usually these assets are things that you're never likely to go and physically check that they exist. It could be holiday homes, or holiday lets, or commercial developments, but they will be there in a position that will actually sound attractive, better returns again. Cold calling in the UK for pensions is looking at trying to be banned at the moment. There's government time or parliamentary time being spent on that. Keeps getting postponed a little bit. UK government have got a few things to worry about at the moment, and so parliamentary time is less. But that will, I'm sure, at some point that ban will come in. Even when it does, of course, it means that people in the UK are banned from pension cold calling, but it won't stretch globally, and it's very difficult to enforce a ban of such type because of the global world that we live in. If you receive a cold call, put the phone down. It's the simplest thing. If you do get a cold call about pensions liberation scamming, then they'll often say that they're from Pensions Wise, they're offering a free pensions review, they're from the pensions regulator. There'll be some recently that said they've been from the Financial Ombudsman Service. They'll look to sound legitimate. If you engage with them, they have a script. And I'm aware of people who engaged with them because they thought this must be a scam, I'll wind these people up, entered into the script, and suddenly they were hooked. I thought, I must have been wrong. She's lovely, this woman that I'm dealing with on the telephone. So yeah, I'll spend a bit of time with them. And they called me back when they said they'd call me back, because that's always their favourite one. I'll call you back. As soon as we establish reliability, that's one of the 4 key facets of trust. And so they'll want to be given the opportunity to call you back. And so we can start out with our guard up. They're very skilled at breaking that guard down. So put the phone down. Simplest thing to do. I showed my age there. Putting the phone down was that for me, wasn't it? Of course, these days putting the phone down is never that anymore, is it? Raise the issue with vulnerable relatives. And an important point here. Oftentimes we'll talk about vulnerable people and we'll think about elderly people, people in those later stages of life. Vulnerability can occur at any point in time. And so when we're talking to vulnerable relatives, vulnerable friends, think about who that might be beyond those usual obvious candidates. And of course, talk to an independent financial advisor if you do want advice in terms of what to do with your pension. But if you're in any way concerned, talk to a regulator or talk to the authorities. Home buying fraud is becoming more popular. Home buying fraud is where scammers will have been monitoring emails. They'll have gained access to emails, either your emails or your solicitor's emails, and they'll be waiting just for that right moment, the moment around about 24 hours before you transfer your money to your solicitor. Because at the end of the day, buying a house is exciting. When we're looking at purchasing a property, then we're not really thinking about the money to the solicitor. We're thinking about how quickly can we get to Homebase or B&Q and decorate the rooms that have got that awful wallpaper that we want to remove to make it look as we want it to look. And so with home buying fraud, they prey on that. They hit you at just the right time, just before you're due to complete. And they'll send you an email, and the email will say, we've changed our bank account. We are your solicitors. It'll look like it comes from the solicitors. And it'll say, we have changed our bank account details for this transaction. Please send the money here. And it will normally take a day or so for you to realise, and that day will be the day that you were due to complete on your mortgage, and your solicitor picks up the phone and says, where's the money for the deposit? Because I've not had it yet. And I can't imagine how that must feel if you're trying to buy a house and realise in that moment that you've just been scammed. How can we defend against that? Well, if anybody ever sends you an email or any other communication and asks you to send them money, a very simple thing to do would be to pick the phone up to them and ask. If you're working with an organisation that you're likely to be making big transactions with, then set up a password so that nobody else can ring up and ask them to send money on your behalf, so that you begin to just form those layers of protection. And then telephone scams. Telephone scams also, there we go, come into play with computer software fraud a lot more now. Has anyone here had somebody ring you up recently and tell you that your internet connection isn't working or your broadband's about to fail? Oh, it's a very popular one at the moment in my mum and dad's house. Actually, every day my dad will text me and say, my broadband's going to fail. I'll say, no, it's not. It's still working. You're all right. It's a scam. But they're very plausible. You'll get a telephone call and this person will say, we're here from Microsoft, or we're here from whatever other provider that you may have, and they'll say that we've detected a flaw in your broadband connectivity, or we've detected a flaw in your laptop whilst you've been utilising it. We need you to log in and then we can fix it for you. And of course you log into what looks like a very legitimate site, because these sites are designed to look exactly like what you would expect the real thing to be. And at that point, as you're keying in all your details, they're just taking all those details away and possibly installing malware on your machine as well. So there's real risk there because it sounds so plausible. We're very used, particularly in our working lives, to have IT support. IT support is often a third-party organisation. So when IT support rings you at home, given that so many of us now have utility services with IT providers, we might pay a small amount every month at a PC World or a Currys or whatever it might be in order to effectively insure our machine. How reasonable would it seem if we're paying somebody for a service, if they've spotted a problem with our machine, that actually they would pick the phone up and say that's where they're from and give us the opportunity to let them fix it there and then? You can almost see people going onto the Trust Advisor websites and starting putting their 5-star reviews in now, can't you? My organisation were brilliant. They spotted a fault I didn't realise, and they're now fixing it for me whilst I type in this amazing review. But of course the reality is that it isn't from your legitimate service provider, it's simply from a scammer, and they'll do it over the telephone or they'll do it directly to your machine via an email. And these days, water, gas, electricity, broadband, particularly if you've got teenage children, it's a vital utility. The threat of somebody turning that off, the threat of that not working, especially if all of your TV comes through it, all that Ryder Cup footage coming through your broadband, it's about to go off, let's get it fixed quickly. And so scammers prey on people's vulnerabilities because we like to trust, and we should be able to trust, of course, and we like to be doing the things that we're doing, and we're pressed for time and we're distracted. So nobody is going to, no legitimate organisation is going to offer to fix your computer problems when you don't know there is a computer problem. So check the sources of emails. As well, with phishing email scams and with those, often it'll look like a legitimate email. When you click on it, there'll be a load of gobbledygook underneath, because they can skim the email so that you can see that, or it looks like it's legitimately from your service provider, whoever that might be. Don't open attachments. Every week or so, I'll see somebody that I'm connected on social media, usually LinkedIn. They will send an email round. Their head will be hanging with a feeling of shame that they have exposed themselves to their system sending out hundreds of emails to all of their contacts because they clicked on a link. It's the link of shame that we click on, and this bounces around the community. And oftentimes they're fairly mundane things, but they can be quite serious and significant. And of course, if you've got one email password for all of your social media accounts and all of your other accounts, and then that transfers into some of the things that you might do with banking and other stuff like that, then it's very easy for people to start actually getting your data, and that moves away from simple scamming to identity fraud and identity theft. So all of these things can lead to much more significant consequences. Never give card, bank details or passwords via email or any other medium in that instance. No legitimate organisation will ever ask you for a whole password. I started by mentioning the dangers of public internet. One of the greatest threats to our personal security, particularly man-in-the-middle threats as they call them, where somebody will set up an internet available connection and it will look like the organisation that you are sat in. So you might be sat in Costa Coffee and you may see Costa One or Castor or whatever it might be. They'll change it very slightly and you will think, oh, there we go, internet connection, Costa Coffee, log into that. And all of a sudden you've logged into somebody else's system. If you are going to use your internet connection outside in public, either utilise your own 4G connection from your telephone provider and set up a personal hotspot that will be encrypted, or use a virtual private network. Never connect on free public access, because free public access, I'm not saying that all free public access is bad, but there are so many risks involved in connecting on free public access. We do it all the time. So there's some of the key points. I started off saying that it was about trust. We should be able to trust people and we should be able to trust organisations, but we can do more to protect ourselves so that we feel better, and that allows us to trust people more, make those simple steps, take those protections, and you can happily go about still using the telephone and the internet. Any questions? Then that is me done. I hope I didn't move around too much for you.
Question?
Yes.
I mean, you mentioned there about getting onto the private networks and things, but all people who don't do that, how are they picking up these people in the first place? You know, the phone numbers and that sort of thing. Yeah, where is the scam actually starting?
The phone numbers are generally, they're random dialers. So you know, once you answer the phone to a scammer, then scamming organisations, they have a network. They will share that information if they think you're susceptible. And it starts with, do they think you're susceptible to answering the telephone? And then they'll share that information. But these are random dialers. They pick a series of numbers. You know, some will use database stuff, but it's usually a series of numbers, and the dialer will just keep sending them out. And if you can just be unlucky that you've picked up that one. But if you engage, then you're somebody who engages. And even if you engage negatively, that's still attractive, because engagement is what they crave, because that gives them the opportunity to utilise their script and utilise those techniques.
We've had like telecom people, Isle of Man Bank, very specific to the Isle of Man. You know, these people have really got some knowledge base somewhere, haven't they?
They can do, yeah, but it only takes one disgruntled employee to sell data. And you know, there was something over the last 3 or 4 years in the UK. Anybody who's had any Aviva insurance product will have had no end of calls, because there was an individual, a sole disgruntled employee that utilised an awful lot of data that they had access to, so that Aviva customers, Aviva insurance and customers specifically, became targets for these cold calls.
I've got a question not totally related to what you're talking about, but slightly, I hope. If I have a small business and I accept payments online through my mobile device or something like that, are there any inherent risks with that which are different to these sorts of risks?
Not if you're, you know, if you're accepting payments through a mobile device, and that will all be encrypted. From a business point of view, what you need to be really careful of is if you're accepting on the telephone. You know, we'll all have been subject to picking. You know, we're discussing with a client, they're buying our product or service. We say, "Oh, let me just take your card details now." Happens a lot still, doesn't it? We might have a card machine that we're going to key those card details to. Where do we record those card details? Well, I'm not often convinced that people are actually keying them directly into the payment machine there and then, and so they're probably writing them down. What happens to that? Does it go and get shredded? Or does it just go in the bin or just sit there? And so, you know, in terms of how can people get hold of people's card details, there are so many potential risks and holes in the system that we just have to be vigilant. If you ever do write anybody else's payment details down, completely destroy it afterwards. You know, pass that on to them, do that favour for them, because if it goes into the refuse system, then it's easily picked up.